Hey, and welcome to this video in See the Light, Easy Wins to Improve Your Asset Framework Experience. So we've done with the standard asset framework best practices, and we've now moved on to the analytics portion. The first set of best practices we looked at in our last video were to try and make sure that whenever you're doing a calculation, split it up into variables, and then also try and reduce the number of calls to the data archive. As we saw, a simple change like that reduced this load we put on our analysis server by 16 times. We also saw at the end of the last video that scheduling is very important. We brought the difference between the production and the sandbox environment was that in the production environment we were evaluating 9 times over 8 hours, whereas in the production environment that number was well into the hundreds. So that's just putting unnecessary load on your service. It's always important when doing calculations in your system to determine how often they need to run. If they need to run every time a value updates, that's fine. If they instead only need to update once a day, always keep that in mind. Now, the problem we're going to be working with in this instance is that our chief maintenance engineer, he wants to keep track of the availability monthly average, and this is just to identify which form, fill, and seal units have had the most downtime in the last month. He doesn't need the information every day, every hour. He only needs the information twice a week when he has his meetings with the maintenance team. So let's jump into PySystem Explorer, and we can have a look at form, fill, and seal machine number 1. We have this availability monthly average variable, and it's currently sitting at 85%. Having a look at the analysis which feeds this calculation, it's called availability monthly average. You can see we've applied the variable name for v_avail_average, and the expression is tag average of the availability attribute from a month ago to now. So this is a 1 month rolling availability average. You can see it's outputting to the availability monthly average variable. And if we have a look towards the bottom of the screen, you can see that we've chosen to schedule this periodically. But it's scheduled for 1 minute. So every minute we're loading a month's worth of raw data into memory, calculating the average, and then writing it out. Now, this is probably from when this calculation was first built. Often what I will do is set it to a very small period so that the values start updating. But once you're happy with the values, it's always very important to make sure you fix the period so that it's actually relevant. Now, the reason these 1 minute evaluations are a problem is because they pose an unnecessary workload on the analysis service. Especially when backfilling or recalculating the analysis over a period of time, like you may want to do with something like this. Let's say you want to do a backfill over the last 6 months. So you want to see what your last 6 months worth of information was. Doing that would mean running 259,200 evaluations. If instead we brought it down to daily and ran the calculation once a day, for example, we'd only have to do 180 evaluations for that exact same period. Now, in order to run this calculation, what we can do is we can go across, change the scheduling of this calculation. We can head across to our library and have a look at the Sandbox FFS template and go to our analyses templates. Now, this is the calculation here, availability monthly average, and I'm going to set it to be periodic, run daily, and then let's run this at, let's say 1 a.m. If you are running relatively large calculations, it's always a good idea to set them outside of a busy business time so they can just run ahead in the background. With that done, I can say OK, check in my change, and what's going to happen now is that in the back end, the analysis service is going to realize that the scheduling has been changed, and it will switch across to running only once a day at 1 a.m., which is plenty for this calculation. Now, there are times when you may want to do an event-triggered calculation. Let's say we want to see our OEE calculated every time the availability or the performance or the quality updates. We can say schedule it as event-triggered, and then we can choose which values to trigger on. So if I deselect quality, this calculation will run whenever availability or performance updates, but it will ignore quality updates in the calculations. Now, if you would like more information on scheduling, there is a best practices document on PySquared, which will be linked at the end of the section. A great idea for you to go through that, especially if you are seeing that your analysis service is under some quite heavy load. The next video, we will talk about roll-up analyses, and we will talk about why it's important to use the analysis instead of the formula data reference.